Hello there, Force of Will players. My name's Charlie DeMel, and today what we're going to be going over is the most recent Carta Magicka online GP that just occurred this past weekend, as well as updating the tier list that I made in the previous format for the new format as well. So it's going to kind of be like a double video, get them both out of the way, and then get them out there for your viewing pleasure before the next online GP for specifically America this time that's going to be occurring this coming weekend. So, to get it started off, what we have. So this was the ruler breakdown for the Carta Magicka online GP. So it's done alphabetically, but in terms of tag, what we can see is the primary like top dog for tag is going to be Carlina decks. So there are 17 total decks that played Carlina in them in some form. There are 3 that have Asmodius, 6 that have Stemma, 2 that have Belial, and 6 that have Dante. So we've kind of seen the Stemma list from the Converging Wills event before the new set Game of Gods Reloaded released. However, I'm not going to include that event because we are technically in a new set, stuff changes, etc., etc. But it is kind of good to look at that was the only event coming in to this online GP. And in that event, there was a large surge of Carlina Stemma. A lot of people playing Carlina Stemma. And so we kind of see that within our top 8 that we had at the Carta Magicka GP as well as just the total grand breakdown here. Other interesting things to note about the breakdown, there were 9 Nyarlathoteps, none of them topped. However, there were 9 of them. Part of that is partially due to how that deck probably plays. Aggro is a lot easier typically to play, and that deck is a lot of fun, in my personal opinion. I really enjoy it. So I'm not surprised that there were that many. There were 6 Kaguya's. Kaguya, I believe, won the Converging Wills event. So honestly, that number seems a little bit lower than I would expect. And then there were 10 Feith Mooges. Feith Mooge is kind of the toolboxy, you can make it build to beat whatever you kind of want. I believe there was either 1 or 2 that topped the Converging Wills event. However, one of the biggest things that Feith Mooge suffered from was it didn't have ways to deal with wide boards, and it didn't have ways to deal with order, which it both got in the new set Game of Gods Reloaded with the introduction of a card called a Flashing Smile, which I go over in my top 10 Game of Gods Reloaded cards. So it kind of shored up that weakness, and we can kind of see that within how the event played out in the top 8. So moving into the top 8, I do have the top 8. So this is what top 8 seeding was after Swiss. This is not final standings. I have final standings written down somewhere else. But this is what it was after top 8, after Swiss. So Paul Martinson came in first with Feasting Moojdart. Philip, I believe it's pronounced Chibiors, came in second with Carlina Stemma, and I'm going to stop pronouncing people's names before I anger someone. So you keep going down the list. Interestingly enough, in third place, we have a Molest Moojdart deck, which was known to be like a burn deck, very prominent when the tag rulers first released, the 6 Sage tag rulers. However, it kind of fell off with the introduction of Belial and other things like that. Moving on, we have Carlina Dante, another Feasting Moojdart list, another Carlina Dante list, a Kaguya list, and another Carlina Stemma list. So there's a decent spread between Carlina X. So we can see that Carlina is, again, the predominant best fallen angel, de facto ruler. Cheating mana is very, very good in this game, and she just does it the best. However, there is a split between the amount of Stemmas and the amount of Dantes. I believe it's actually 50-50. Yeah, so 2 Dantes, 2 Stemmas. And then the rest of the lists are 3 other tags, but in the form of 6 Sages and not Fallen Angels, and then 1 Kaguya in the form of an Order Ruler. So we don't really see a whole lot of Order from any of the new Order cards. I actually don't think any Machinas entered the event. Yeah, there were no Machina players in the event. There were 2 Alice players, yeah, and no Machina players, and 3 Shiva players, and I believe 0 Dante players. 0 of the new Dante players. Okay. A lot of that, or well, not a lot, but part of it, the order power level in like comparatively to tag is a lot lower. The other thing is people have been building, specifically like Ruler School TCG has been touting this Order Killer Carlina Stemma deck, and because of its performance within the last the Converging Wills event, I believe people were a lot more afraid of Order Killer, which I believe Carlina Stemma was pretty well represented overall. So the probably a good idea to fear that. So it's good to shore up that matchup and maybe play something else. I believe Jeremy went on record and talked about how it felt weak against Feith Muge, so maybe try and shore up that matchup is what some of these players did. So anyway, this is what we have. After final standings, I had to kind of like write down the ruler count. I didn't write the names because we're just interested in the rulers for this. So this is what the final breakdown was. So first place was a Carlina Dante, second place was a Carlina Stemma, third place was a Feith Muge, fourth place was a Carlina Dante, and then 5th through 8th technically don't matter. You don't play for those spots. It just goes to seeding at that point, whether you're determined 5th through 8th. So 5th was another Feith Muge, 6th was Muge Molest, 7th was Kaguya, 8th was Carlina Stemma. So we can kind of see that the top end of it is very Carlina heavy, right? It looks all the Carlinas won their top 8 matchups -1. And I believe the Carlina Stemma played against the Feith Muge that was in the top. So I believe all the Carlina decks did not play against each other in the top 8, which is kind of funny. They were spaced perfectly apart. But we do see this overabundance of Carlina within the top 8. So, moving into the tier list video, right? So this is the tier maker that I did for the last tier list video. This is what it was, what I had set up moving into the Game of Gods format. This is not Game of Gods Reloaded, this is just Game of Gods. And so last time when I had actually made this list, how I kind of put the different tiers, I don't have like each fallen ruler attached, so I kind of put the main fallen ruler, or tag ruler I guess you should say, in the higher tier, and then the like sub one, the one you care less about, in a lower tier. The way the tiers are split, anything from B tier above I believe could potentially win an event if it is piloted by a good enough player. Anything at C tier I believe could top 8 an event, but I don't see it ever winning. Anything below that, I don't really see top 8ing an event. So anyway, moving on with that. First, I'm going to do the adds. So I'm going to add the new rulers, because they have the 4 new rulers from Game of Gods Reloaded. So, starting off with Shiva. Shiva I'm going to put in C tier, okay? So we're going to keep Shiva there, partially because, again, there's been a huge underrepresentation of Order, partially because Tag is so powerful, and the Order mechanic feels a lot less powerful than Tag. The Order... Sorry, had to think about what I said there for a second. The Order mechanic feels a lot less powerful than Tag. It honestly feels like instead of cheating stones, you're going down on mana in order to order up, and the other decks are just cheating mana in the first place, so trying to play mana down isn't that great, right? Like, it just doesn't feel good. And Shiva specifically does not have any way to cheat mana until you're able to get Shiva's Arena expansion into play, which you can't do at a reasonable rate until you get more than 3,000 attack power in play, which doesn't really happen until turn 2, turn 3. Turn 3, probably turn 2 at the earliest, but typically probably turn 3. And then it doesn't have any kind of protection, so it doesn't have Eternal, it doesn't have Barrier, so it's very easy to deal with once it gets into play, and you're not cheating mana until later turns in the game. Shiva does have Rigveda. The Carlina Stemalists played a bunch of Rigveda. It was a very prevalent card. I'm sure a lot of you saw it on any stream matches that showed Carlina Stemma. It is very, very good. It is a very good card in that deck. And in Shiva, it just gets more value and more powerful, technically. However, it wasn't enough to prop up all the problems Shiva has. It's the deck core itself for Shiva outside of Rigveda is incredibly underpowered. So it just doesn't do that great. Your best bet with Shiva is playing like a Prisia toolbox, and Fiefmuj is just doing that better. So that's why Shiva gets to go into the C tier. Machina. So I'm actually surprised no one played this deck. I'm gonna put him in B tier to kind of holding judgment on this one. He's like bottom of B tier, like top of C tier. I actually am very confused as to where to put him. I've played a little bit of my version of the deck, which can be updated. I don't play a lot outside of playtesting new things to kind of see what decks look like. But you're able to mill yourself out pretty consistently in order to get to a Tidor win con. However, the issue with Tidor as a win con is Tidor also has no built-in protection outside of you playing cards like Guinevere, like Tidor's gimmick, like stuff like that to prevent your opponent from playing on your turn. The form of protection that you give Tidor is your opponent just can't play cards, right? Stuff like Law of Silence or Dance of Spirits. However, the issue is, specifically with Guinevere, you want to stick a Guinevere early to prevent your opponent from playing, as well as get value off of it, like during your turn. But the problem becomes that Guinevere, while she's ordered, you can't order your Tidor, which you need to do in order to do Knight of Knights potential loops. So, and you need to have Tidor ordered in order to actually get the, when you would draw a card, your opponent loses, your opponent would lose instead, or you win the game instead. So the issue becomes that Tidor is quite expensive. There are ways to cheat in mana to play him. However, trying to get all the mana in order to play these cards becomes a little bit of a chore within Machina. So I'm sure someone will build something. Part of the thing was I don't think people got cards fast enough because this event occurred a week after the official release for Game of Gods Reloaded, so I don't think people had enough cards or enough time to get cards in order to play some more decks that they might find fun. So that's why I'm going to put Machina. It's kind of tentatively B tier. Like, you could argue it goes into C tier, like, definitely. But I feel like it has some legs in the form of all the other absurd cards Machina got, like Setting the Stage of Providence. Just Guinevere's very, very good. I wasn't like super high on, I think it's called Light of the Unknown, something like that. It's the two mana cost, you name a card, but that card's also like absurd in the deck. So I struggle to put this in either tier, so I'm just going to tentatively put it in B tier, so in case someone does somehow win an event with this deck, I don't look like an idiot. Dante. Dante I'm going to put in C tier. So the reason I'm going to put Dante in C tier is, unfortunately, a lot of its plays aren't very safe. So, like, you can't order into cards effectively without getting punished on the following turn, whereas other decks can do that. So, like, for example, Machina can order into Guinevere without getting punished. Just ordering Guinevere off of Energize prevents you from being punished by any deck in the game, including Carlina. It just cannot be answered on your turn. They have to do it at sorcery speed. So, Machina still at least has that. We'll get to Alice in a second. She also kind of has that. Shiva does not have that, and neither does Dante. If you play something and you order it off of your Energize, you're probably going to get punished into the following turn. Shiva kind of has Rigveda as backup because they get to call a stone and they can use the 1 mana Rigveda, right? Dante, again, just doesn't really have anything. Their best turn 1 order is going to be like either Lucifer or Dark Charlotte. And if they do, and so the issue with doing it with Lucifer is if you go second, you would have to call your stone first, which means if you don't hit 6 Sage Stone, you can't order Lucifer because your ruler won't be recovered. So your best one is probably Energized Charlotte. And Energized Charlotte is very easy to kill. It's like just not really protected. But if you get like an Excalibur Fallen trigger, that's pretty good. It's just in a really weird spot. I think as a game gets rolling, Dante gets a lot more powerful. I would probably put Dante above Shiva, if I'm being honest. But they're like the core of Dante is just more powerful than the core of Shiva. However, I don't think it's strong enough to compete at a top level, if that makes sense. So that's why I'm going to put Dante in C tier. Last, Alice. Only 2 people played this deck, and I'm convinced a lot of top players or players who you would expect to top events, win events, etc., are going to play whatever they think is the best deck. Not something that they like that's a pet deck and that is strong, but something that is the best deck in order to win. So I'm going to put Alice in A tier. So my reasoning for Alice in A tier, keep in mind this tier list is purely for New Frontiers format. Nothing in terms of Wanderer is going to keep her up at A tier. However, so what Alice does is, there are a few things about Alice, and I kind of talk about this again in my top 10 video, but the main thing is every time you order her, you replace the card you play. So she's almost never going value down. Like, Alice has enough value to compete with Carlina Stemma, with Feith Muj. That deck just has a lot of it. The big issue, and in the form of Ayu, it cheats mana. So it's cheating mana, it's gaining value. It's doing what best, like, decks that are the best decks in the game want to do. Like, it is doing that. Again, the issue it suffers under is the order tax. Order is not that powerful of a mechanic. While it does prevent canceling, we now have ways in the other decks to just deal with things that are in play with J-Rulers. There's a lot more cards that just simply kill entities rather than just killing resonators now. So the order mechanic kind of falls off a bit. However, I believe there was a stream match where a player Tales of Fantasia chained like 4 times or something like that. So it has power. It has very strong plays. Alice does have that stuff. I just don't think any top player was playing Alice because they were either on Feith Muj or some form of Fallen Angel deck going into this tournament. But I think Alice has legs. I truly, truly do. If it won an event, I would not be surprised. But that's just where I'm going to put it for now. It could be B tier, just because it's order, and Feith Muj and Carlina are so high above the rest of the playing field that it just can't be dealt with. But for now, I'm going to keep it in A tier. Okay, now the moves. We're going to move some cards around, right? So, again, this is like the C tier is, I could see the deck top 8ing. I can see most decks, if piloted well enough, can top an event. Sometimes people just get lucky with their matchups. It happens. It has happened to me. However, they typically will not. Anything B tier or above can potentially top an event. A tier is probably going to get 1 top 8 slot. S tier is going to take up most of the top 8 slots. So starting at S tier, I'm going to move Belial all the way down to B tier. So Belial was very powerful in the old versions, in like the older formats, when Violet was running around and people were going, I play a 40-40 and can kill you from 2,000 or 4,000, doesn't really matter. So Belial was a lot more popular back then. In addition, the Prisia chains were like Prisia, Magna's Guardian Beast, never end. Like, your opponent just made wide boards. Your opponents just put more than 4,000 power into play for free, effectively. So, Belial had a lot more legs. There weren't a lot of burn decks. There weren't decks going like, shoot you for 15, shoot you for blah, blah, blah. That was mainly just Virgilius type decks. So, it was a lot stronger in previous formats. It won a GP in previous formats. However, with Violet having kind of gone down in strength, effectively, or other decks just being better in strength, the game becoming more tempo oriented and less OTK oriented in the form of how much damage people are taking, Belial loses a lot of value. In addition, the introduction of Feith Sing and 7th Boon has made it so that, and Rigveda has made it so that there are multiple ways to cancel Erythropias, cancel Goddarts, cancel things that could allow a Belial player to win. But so Belial's going to go down to B tier. That's just where we're going to keep him at. If he happens to pop up at an event, he pops up at an event. Again, I could see a Belial X deck winning, but it's not super popular anymore. Feasting, Mujdart, Carlina, all stay at S tier. We saw it from our top breakdown. Carlina's insane. There were 19 Carlinas or 17 Carlinas. Feath Muj, still like the best toolbox deck in the game. It can be built to beat almost anything. The issue is just trying to build it to beat everything. Violet. So I'm going to keep Violet in A tier. It still does what it does very well. It also has access to setting the stage for Providence now, in addition to Tachyons. So it has a huge suite of spells in order to deal with counter spells now. I believe the highest Violet in the last event was at 12th place. However, I do know that player did not have their cards from the new set, so setting the stage of Providences, Tidor's gimmicks, potentially, stuff like that hadn't arrived yet. So they're playing basically an old Violet list. With the newer cards, I believe Violet is a lot stronger, a lot more powerful, a lot more potent, okay? So I still, and because of the reduction in Belials, a lot more is just going to be Baja, Swing. The issue Violet will deal with is, the biggest thing was sticking things through cancel spells. That used to be the problem, because Baja was almost impossible to deal with. Now, with how much removal we have, generic removal, Baja is a lot easier to kill. So, the issue that will come about with Violet, potentially, is moving more into field protection and less cancel protection. But if you move into more field protection and less cancel protection, you kind of have to start weaving in, like, Winds of Asgard, maybe Lightning Mermaids, other things like that. Astema and Dante get to remain at A tier. I'm not going to move them into S tier because they were not the primary tag ruler for Carlina. However, they do get to remain at A tier because it was Carlina Astema decks, Carlina Dante decks. Those were the ones running around. Niar, I'm going to move down to B tier. Again, wouldn't be surprised if it won an event, wouldn't be surprised if it top 8'd an event. However, I don't think any top players or enough players are on Niar in order to make it as prevalent as it could be. They're playing other decks, better decks, potentially. Almerius, we didn't see anything. I put Almerius in the B tier slot because it was tied to Feath Muj and other stuff like that, but I think Almerius gets to go down into C tier now. We'll just put it next to the other tag rulers. It gets to go down into C tier. Part of the issue with it is there isn't any real good light card that you're trying to rip off of it anymore. The best one used to be Final Stance, which you put into the grave with Mikage Rhea. However, there isn't any real like combo play with it anymore. So, unfortunately, Almerius will get to move down. Wolfgang, I don't know how I feel about Wolfgang. I feel like it should stay in B tier. We're going to keep it in B tier. The reasoning for it is, again, it kind of suffers from the most good players typically just play the best deck in Force of Will. There is no real players that play like pet decks like there typically is in Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic, stuff like that. So I'm going to keep Wolfgang in B tier. It still has, like, its Demonic Worlds, it has things that it can do, it has access to the new Dante cards. Like, it has a lot of stuff. I just don't think it got a lot of new tech or new options comparatively to all the other rulers, okay? The other issue is its stone base is a little bit awkward. However, because of the whole Demonic World, you could pay Void into searching. It kind of works itself out. Kaguya, this might be a little bit controversial, but I'm going to move her up to A tier. The reasoning for it is one top 8'd this event, right? So we did have one in the top 8, and then I believe one won the Converging Wills event. So I believe Kaguya is very powerful against Carlina Astema and Feath Muj, I believe. it just works. It just functions on a line that neither deck is really hitting that well. Carlina Stemma has a better time against it because, again, it's a whole order killing thing. However, that deck, Kaguya just has so much cancel potential, and not being able to deal with stuff like Hanzo, other things like that while you set up is like a very powerful tool. Odin's going to move down to C tier. He just hasn't been putting up any results. I don't know if that's whether from his cards just not being as powerful, people just not playing him because they're on better rulers, etc., etc. An interesting thing that Odin did get is the form of Tea Party, where he has Odin Enters the Game of Gods, and you can remove a Tea Party off of Odin Enters the Game of Gods. So he kind of has mana ramp in that sense, but you kind of need a little bit of RNG in order to get there. But we'll see. I still like Odin as a deck. I think that deck's very cool, but it hasn't been putting up a lot of good results outside of Kaltuma's OLS tournaments, which are mainly have just been like 5 to 6 people. So it's just going to get demoted to C tier for the time being. Moving into C tier, any of these rulers, I'm gonna I'm biased, so I'll put him at the top of B tier so people don't say I'm just a biased piece of poop. So Welser Combo is a very fun deck, and it's a very strong deck. It also got a lot of stuff to stop its main weakness, which is canceling, or getting its stuff canceled in the form of setting the stage of Providence. So Welser Combo is very much just a like Lycion combo deck. That's just what it is. However, it does what it does very, very well. It cheats mana. It does all that good stuff. The main issue, Rigveda really hurts the deck. That is true. Not a lot of decks can functionally deal with how Welser Combo sets up. So that's so it doesn't make a board. It doesn't make creatures. You don't need to kill creatures. All it mainly does is it puts Yggdrasil Top Taurus Destination into play, puts Lycion into play. Otherwise, the deck is pretty much all chance. That's just how the deck functions. So because of that, you need more counter spells to deal with it, which Feith Mouge has, but because we've been moving away from more counter spells and setting the stage of Providence has come into play, Welser Combo has gotten a lot more powerful. It's a lot more streamlined, and it just when the deck gets going, it wins the game just immediately. Like there's just almost nothing a player can do in order to stop the deck once it pops off. So I'm gonna put it into B tier. I might put it into A tier. I think again the issue is top players just typically aren't playing pet decks. I know Steven Holsheiser has been playing this deck in Kaltuma's OLS for a bit. I don't know if he played it in the Converging Wills event or not, but he's been constantly winning the OLS event with this list, his version of the list. So I think it is a very strong deck. I think it's a very powerful deck. If I were to go into a GP, I'd probably play it. One, because I like playing not off-meta decks anyway, and it feels powerful enough to play. Molest I'm going to keep in C tier, even with the Mouge Dart Molest. I think the S tier Mouge and the C tier Molest balances it out in like the mid A to B tier. It was kind of like a one-off, like out of nowhere kind of burn deck that popped off. It's very cool that it came up. I'm glad that there are still burn decks in the format. Maybe we'll see it in NA. I don't really think so, but it'd be really cool if we did. Faria, I have an argument to move it into B tier, and my main argument is Tea Party existing. Because the thing with Tea Party existing, so Faria or Excalibur Genesis plays first boon, right? So any first boon decks already have great Tea Party access, because when you put Tea Party into the RFG, you already activate its continuous effect to put it back into the grave, so it's just free. The other thing is, I believe Excalibur Genesis benefits the most from the light cards gain quick cast effect, for a couple reasons. One, mainly it gives Lenneth quick cast. So being able to give Lenneth quick cast is incredibly powerful. It kind of opens up a suite of removal options for the deck, in addition to kind of other protection and interaction that the deck didn't have in the first place, because the only card that was really quick cast were cards that gave you guidance counters and Schrodinger. And Schrodinger was your main interaction, and all that did was rest stuff. However, now with Lenneth having quick cast, you have access to Hero of Darkness, Hero of Water, other things like that, where you don't have to rely on Excalibur Genesis's put into play a hero in order to play stuff at quick cast speed. You can now do it with other stuff. And that deck, Excalibur Genesis, cheats mana very well. It also has a lot of value. A lot of the guidance cards, guidance counter cards, will either replace themselves or do something else like that. And then Charlotte herself draws you more cards than you have. Or more cards than she costs, effectively. So, deck has value, deck has mana cheats, and now it kind of has quick cast, which means it has interaction in the form of, like, Lenneth plays. So, I'm gonna keep it in C tier for now. I can't see it winning an event, but I could, like, we'll put it at the top of C tier. I can very much see it just having, again, more options. It's just doing a lot more stuff because of quick cast off of Tea Party, which funnily enough is the weakest version, the weakest part of that effect typically, is the best thing for Excalibur Genesis. I'm going to move Asmodius up to B tier. We've just seen quite a lot of Carlina Asmodius. We saw a lot at the Converging Wills event, in the top 8 of the Converging Wills event. And we saw a decent chunk, unfortunately none topped, but we did see a decent chunk of it in this most recent event, the Carta Magicka event. So, again, it's just Carlina Asmodius. That's the main one. However, it's doing the same kind of stuff, producing multiple Gods arts, getting a bunch of counters on stuff, hitting your opponent for a lot of damage. It's doing it less consistently without, like, Light of Raisin Revive, other things like that. However, it still has play lines that it can make. It has the Violet play line, the 3-drop Violet plays that it can do with, like, Atomic Bahamut. So it just has stuff it's doing. So I'm going to put it up to B tier. Beatrice and Loki are going to stay in C tier along with Wolfgang and Olivia. Again, I could see them topping an event potentially if a good enough player came along, maybe got another player maybe got lucky enough, a good player gets lucky, like all those kinds of things. I could potentially see it topping an event. Unfortunately, again, Loki gets better as Order gets better, but because Order is not really getting better, Loki will not be getting better. So potentially with rotation, or well, no, there won't be rotation anymore. We'll be moving into all Wanderer. Maybe with Wanderer, with the ban list and everything like that, Order becomes a lot more prevalent. In that case, Loki will gain more traction. D tier, F tier, and literally don't know tier, and then we'll put one more underneath it. I'm sorry, I forgot to do this last week. We're gonna add a row below. There we go. We're gonna hang on. There is one more tier change. There we go. Okay, and with that, that is the new tier list. So this would be the tier list that I would use moving into the NA Games and Geek GP this coming weekend for March. I believe it is March. Let's see. We have a calendar. We can check. March 12th and 13th. Anyway, that is the tier list. Gonna leave it up. My name is Charlie DeMel. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you either this weekend or maybe in my stream in the future. Have a good one. Bye.